I went fabric shopping again. Everything is so warm and fluffy and shiny. Yay! Welcome to Cosplayland! I am Alice and today I'm starting a new project. So I thought I would start a Christmas project this time because I used to make a Christmas dress every single year for Christmas. Obviously it was a cosplay dress and I didn't really wear it to the family meal. So this year I decided to take back the tradition of making a cosplay dress, and I'm just gonna be making Barbara from Genshin Impact. This is supposed to be an official picture from a couple of years ago when Hoyo started with this project and it wasn't super famous, but it's not really an in-game design, so of course I had the problem of just having like the one reference picture, so you know, I just went crazy and just make everything super fluffy and nice and just like use like nice materials that just say Christmas to me. So I'm just gonna just go ahead and just start doing this cosplay because I really have very little time to finish it before Christmas, so here we go! First of all, I'm going to start by putting my pattern on top of my lovely fabric. For this project I chose a wine red color taffeta which is very shiny and it just says Christmas to me. Usually I don't pin my patterns because I find it's easier to just place some weights on top, but feel free to do so if it becomes a little bit flimsy. Also, don't forget that you need to leave some space for the seams because my patterns, which are the ones that I'm using, have no seam allowance. I do this because I find it much easier for you to decide how much seam allowance you would need or you would want to use. Don't forget to add the seam allowance to the waist because otherwise it won't fit correctly. I must say that for this project in particular, I decided to fold my fabric in 4. This way I will only need to cut a seam on the back and I won't have seams on the sides. Also, I didn't leave any seam allowances for this pattern at the bottom because I'm going to be adding a trim at the bottom of the skirt and this is going to make it a little bit longer. For the ultimate cupcake look, I'm using this petticoat underneath my skirt. Make sure that if you are using a petticoat, you test your fabric on top of it because it could be a bit too long or a bit too short. I think mine is going to be just right. I decided to use organza for the top skirt because I thought it would just look beautiful. This fabric is a little bit difficult to work with because it moves a lot and it just takes a little bit of practice to get it right. I did pin the fabric underneath to make sure the layers didn't move, and then I placed my pattern again on top with my weights. This fabric seems to be slightly narrower than your usual fabric, but it just gets to the bottom of the pattern I've made for the skirt. Also notice that I'm going to be cutting my full length skirt because it's much easier to do the decorations on top and then cut the extra edge later on. On my latest project I was using heat transfer vinyl all the time, but it's a little bit expensive and this skirt is quite big, so I had this kind of lame fabric, fake leather on gold, and I'm just going to be trying something new. But first of all I need to transfer my pattern to the actual fabric, so what I'm going to be using is some carbon paper. What happens with this paper is that when you trace anything on top of it, the image just gets transferred to the fabric underneath. You do need to push a little bit to get that transfer done, so I wouldn't recommend you to use a pencil like I started with. Also remember that this will stain the fabric, so just make sure you're using the back of your fabric when you transfer it. Then without moving your pattern, you just need to move the carbon paper and carry on drawing your sketch. For this project in particular, I'm going to be using this spray glue which is especially designed for fabric. I've never used it before, so I'm not sure if it's gonna work, but you can only know if you experiment with it. In general, glues can be quite damaging and dangerous. The first glue that I got was like very dangerous and I just took it back to the shop. This one seems to be a little bit more environmentally friendly, but nevertheless I will still be using some gloves and special equipment and breathers to make sure none of that glue gets into my lungs. And here's a little tip for you. When you finish with your spray, just put it upside down so you get that extra glue out of the nozzle, and then your sprays will last much longer. I expected my glue to be a little bit tacky, but it was completely dry once I used it. It's gonna be heat activated with the iron when I apply it to my fabric. Very carefully, I just cut all the patterns and got them ready for the next step. Yeah, my next step was actually getting my fabric from underneath my cat. Thanks for keeping it warm. The advantage of using organza is that you can actually see what's underneath, so I placed my pattern under my skirt and then I could see exactly where I had to put my little trims. Now that my fabric is ready, I need to apply heat on top, but if I were to put my iron just on top of these motifs, what would happen is that my fabric would melt because it's kind of plastic, so you want to put some cloth in between your iron and your motifs to make sure they don't melt. Hold your iron for a few seconds as instructed on the spray can, and then you can just keep moving it, just being careful not to get anything out of place. I was honestly quite impressed by the bond of this material, and as you can see they stayed quite well. Once everything was done, I just had to trim the excess of my fabric, and because this fabric is quite stiff, I'm just hoping it won't fray too much, and I'm just gonna leave it like that. Add golden cats to your cosplay life and you will always be happy. Right, Melina? There is a lot of fabric on this skirt, so now I need to put both of them together, and I would like to fool you saying that I did it on top of the table, but no, I didn't. I went to the floor. Just stretch the fabric and just paste the top of the skirt so you can sew it together. Look, it's as big as my room. I just used a long stitch to sew the top of my skirt and it was ready to add the waistband. But before that we will need to insert the zipper. I have explained this before and it's actually quite easy. I'm going to be using an invisible zipper, and what I do first is open the zipper and just iron it so the teeth will be flat and it will be much easier to sew it with your sewing machine then. To do so, I'm just going to open my zipper and I'm just going to place the side just facing the edge of your fabric. So if it goes like that, I just turn it so it's aligned to the edge of the back of the skirt. Then I'm just going to use my invisible zipper foot to just sew it in place. I did the same with the other side. Perfect! Now you just need to close the rest of the seam at the back. I didn't do so well with this shot, yeah, just do a straight line. We are almost done. Let's do the waistband next. We are gonna need a strip of fabric, so I just folded my fabric in half and cut a strip with my rotary cutter. I need to just get new blades for it. I was willing to do my waistband without any interfacing, and then I remember it's much easier to do a waistband with interfacing. Nevertheless, once you have the interfacing on, what you want to do is just fold it in half first and iron it. Then you want to fold your hem inwards. You can follow the edge of your interfacing, which will make your life much easier. It should look a little bit like this. I'm going to sew the unfolded edge to my skirt. I personally find it easier to iron it now to get a very crisp finish when you fold that edge. I'm going to finish the side first. What you want to do is fold your fabric where you have the previously ironed piece. So what you're going to be doing is just sew this part close before you turn it. Now you can just trim the excess and turn your fabric and you will have a very nice crisp edge. The only thing left to do is to top stitch the edge of your skirt and it will be secured. Remember that you do want to catch that edge of your waistband at the back. At this point, Kitana pointed out a flaw of my technique from before. Some of the pieces had started to just unstick and I had to go back to them with a little bit of fabric glue to make sure they didn't come off. I decided to make my own trim and I did so by cutting pieces of fabric from this larger piece. I used an X-Acto knife to cut the fabric because this way you won't be cutting all the fluffiness of the edges and also you will have less hair to handle in your room afterwards. Then I attached the trim using a zigzag stitch. At this point, I realized that I had stretched my fabric and the bottom of my skirt had become elastic, which is not exactly what you want. And yes, I had to cut out all of the trim and start again, so make sure that when you are using trim like that, if it's slightly elastic, just guide it through the machine to make sure it doesn't stretch. And my skirt was done. I did not finish the edge of the skirt because honestly if you were to look under my skirt I would just slap you, so I have a very good reason not to do it. Fair is quite forgiving, so I got away without it. Overall this was a fun little project which was quite easy to make and I really liked the end of it. Oh well, maybe Kitana doesn't like it so much. It's okay, forget about her, she's not here. I'm just joking, she's such a cute little girl. Okay, you're fierce and dangerous, I got your point. There is already a pattern for a circle skirt in my store, but I will be making full patterns for this fall project once it's finished. Of course, you can join my Patreon if you want to get the pattern first, as well as behind the scenes and lots of extra content and photos. I hope you liked the video and just let me know in the comments if there's anything that you will be doing this Christmas. Don't forget to like and subscribe and don't forget to click that notification bell in order to be the first to see the next part of this project. See you next time, bye! La 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 la. Now you hate me. I get it. It's fine, don't worry.